What if everything you've been taught about being a good person is exactly what's been holding you back? What if your loyalty, your honesty, your kindness, the very things you've been praised for, were never meant to make you powerful, but instead to keep you obedient? What if, without even realizing it, you've been conditioned to play by rules that benefit others, while quietly draining your influence, your control, and your future? This isn't just a provocative question, it's the foundation of how power actually works. You see, we grow up in a world that tells us, be nice, be fair, be good, and everything will fall into place. But deep down, many of us know that's not how the world really works. We've all seen people who lie, manipulate, or pretend rise. We've seen the silent climb faster than the honest. The bold get rewarded. The kind, they often get used. Niccolo Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. But he wasn't a monster or a villain or a cold-hearted schemer like some people think. He was an observer, a realist, a man who lived in a brutal world and dared to write down what most people are still too afraid to admit. Power doesn't go to the most moral, it goes to the most strategic. Machiavelli grew up in 15th century Florence, a place that called itself a republic, but underneath it was all theater. Power moved through bribes, threats, family ties, and secret deals. Leaders came and went. Friends became enemies overnight. And people who clung to fairness and idealism, they didn't last long. In that chaos, Machiavelli studied human behavior, not the behavior people claimed to value, but what they actually rewarded. And he saw the truth that still applies today. Effectiveness often matters more than virtue. And results are what people remember, not your good intentions. Let that sink in. This doesn't mean kindness is useless. It doesn't mean you should be ruthless or cruel. What it means is that if you want to survive or thrive in the real world, you have to stop expecting your goodness to protect you, because it won't. How many times have you stayed quiet to keep the peace, while someone else took the credit, the promotion, or the power? How often have you said yes when you wanted to say no, just to avoid being seen as difficult or selfish? How many moments have you handed over your energy, your ideas, your influence, all for the sake of being liked? It's not your fault. You were taught that goodness equals safety, that being agreeable would lead to acceptance, that playing fair would earn respect. But Machiavelli would ask you, has it? Has being good gotten you everything you want? Or has it, in some cases, become a disguise you wear to avoid conflict while quietly giving your power away? He wasn't encouraging cruelty. He was encouraging clarity. He wanted you to look at the game of life not as it should be, but as it is. And in his view, if you're going to survive that game, let alone win, you need more than good intentions. You need awareness, you need strategy, and you need to understand how others are playing, especially the ones who are smiling while they sharpen their knives. The truth is, people don't follow the strongest moral code. They follow strength, they follow certainty, and sometimes they follow fear. Not because they want to, but because psychologically, that's how power dynamics work. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He saw that morality, as society teaches it, is often used as a leash, a way to keep the masses obedient while the powerful move pieces behind the scenes. And in today's world, that dynamic hasn't changed. It's just wearing better clothes. The coworker who flatters you, then undercuts you in private. The politician who speaks of unity but thrives on division. The friend who mirrors your every move, not out of admiration, but to outmaneuver you when you're not looking. They're playing a game, and most of them don't even know they're playing it, because power doesn't always look like a sword. Sometimes it looks like silence, like charm, like patience used as a weapon. And if you want to navigate that world with strength without losing your soul, you have to understand what Machiavelli was really saying. He wasn't trying to make you heartless. He was trying to wake you up. Because the longer you wait for the world to reward you for your niceness, the longer you stay powerless. But the moment you realize that morality without strategy is just vulnerability, you begin to reclaim your edge. You begin to lead, not with cruelty, but with clarity. Not by dominating others, but by refusing to be dominated. Not by abandoning kindness, but by pairing it with discernment. Because this isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming someone the world can't play. It's about learning how to be both human and untouchable. Now let's talk about the thing no one wants to admit, especially the people who claim the moral high ground. Morality is a trap, at least the way it's sold to most people. Because we're not raised to think critically about ethics, we're raised to obey them. We're handed this neat little box of rules: be honest, be kind, always forgive, don't cause conflict, and we're told this is what makes you a good person. And we buy it, not because we're weak, but because we want to belong. We want to do the right thing. But here's what Machiavelli understood, and what modern psychology confirms: morality isn't always about what's right. Sometimes it's about what's useful. See, there's a difference between ethics and strategy. Ethics tell you what's ideal, strategy tells you what's effective. And in Machiavelli's world, which honestly doesn't look all that different from ours, effectiveness always wins. He wasn't against morality, he just refused to be limited by it. That's the difference between how most people live and how people in power think. Most people follow morality like a GPS they aren't allowed to question. But power players, they understand that morality is a map, and sometimes the path to the goal requires stepping off the main road. Machiavelli famously wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Now, most people stop reading right there and assume he's endorsing cruelty. But that's a shallow take. What he's actually doing is this. He's pointing out that fear is more reliable than love, especially in systems built on control. Because love is emotional. It's warm, yes, but also inconsistent. People love you when it's easy, when you meet their expectations, when it benefits them. But fear? Fear makes people pause. It demands caution. It holds their attention even when they don't like you, maybe especially when they don't like you. It doesn't mean you have to become cold or harsh. It means that if you rely solely on being liked to protect you, you're playing a dangerous game, one that ends with you being the scapegoat. Think about it. How often do good people get walked over because they didn't want to offend anyone? How often does the person who says the hard truth and doesn't sugarcoat it end up getting respect while the polite one gets ignored? We've been conditioned to believe that morality is strength. But the truth is, morality without awareness becomes weakness. You end up following rules that no one else is playing by. And the real kicker? Those who preach morality the loudest are often the ones bending the rules in private. Why? Because they understand something most people don't. Appearances matter more than reality. Machiavelli saw this everywhere in Renaissance politics. Leaders gave speeches about virtue by day and arranged assassinations by night. They wore the mask of the righteous, but behind the curtain, they moved with precision and strategy. And no one remembers their sins. They remember their victories. You don't have to like it, but you'd better understand it, or risk being used by it. So what do we do with that knowledge? Here's the answer Machiavelli would give, and I agree with him. Use morality as a tool, not a leash. Be kind when it serves. Be generous when it's sincere. Be honest when it builds trust. But never make the mistake of thinking those things are always the best move or that they'll always be rewarded. Because sometimes kindness gets mistaken for weakness. And if you're not careful, your virtues become weapons in someone else's hands. It's not about becoming a liar or a manipulator. It's about not being manipulated by your own idealism. Emotional intelligence means knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to forgive and when to draw a hard line, when to give people the benefit of the doubt and when to see their patterns for what they really are. This isn't cynicism, it's wisdom. It's what happens when your ethics grow up. And if you think this is just some ancient power game, look around. Look at how people posture online, curating an image, controlling a narrative. Look at how businesses package values into brand messaging while quietly outsourcing labor to the cheapest bidder. Look at how leaders speak of unity while planting seeds of division for votes. That's not evil. That's design. That's the modern Machiavellian game, and most of us are playing it unconsciously. So what does this mean for you? It means this: stop assuming that being good will protect you. Start understanding that being aware, strategic, and calm under pressure, that's power. Don't abandon your morals. Refine them. Use them with precision. Choose when to be soft and when to be unshakable. Lead with heart, but protect it with vision. Because the people who understand both ethics and strategy, They're the ones who shape the world. The ones who understand only one usually get shaped by it. Here's something you've probably never been taught. Not in school, not at work, not even in leadership books. If you want to survive in a world full of traps, you can't just be strong. You also have to be smart. You have to be both the lion and the fox. This was one of Machiavelli's most important lessons and one of the most misunderstood. He wasn't saying pick one. He was saying, if you want to win, you have to master both. Let's break it down. The lion is bold, powerful, fearless. The lion doesn't ask for permission. It leads with strength, demands respect, and is impossible to ignore. In a room full of passive energy, the lion stands out. When danger shows up, the lion doesn't run. It faces it. But here's the problem. The lion is also predictable, loud, easy to track. You always know where it is, and if you know where the lion is, you know how to trap it. And that's where the fox comes in. The fox doesn't fight head on. It listens, watches, waits. It doesn't announce its next move. It masks it. The fox can lie low for years and strike only when the moment is right. It avoids conflict not because it's afraid, but because it knows timing is everything. The fox survives not through muscle, but through mastery. In modern life, being only the lion will get you burned out. Being only the fox will get you ignored. But being both, that's where real power begins. You speak when it's strategic, not when you're emotional. You take risks, but calculated ones. You command attention, but only when it counts. You let people underestimate you until they can't. And here's the wild part. The most dangerous people you'll ever meet, they don't look dangerous at all, because they've learned how to disguise the lion and sharpen the fox. That boss who always seems calm but moves mountains behind the scenes. That friend who seems easygoing until the deal's done and they always win. That leader who makes you feel safe but you somehow never outmaneuver. They're not just lucky, they're both. Let's take it further. Most people only train one mode. They're taught to be bold, speak up, take charge, be confident. So they roar constantly, never noticing that they're drawing fire. They reveal too much, say too much, do too much, and eventually, they get outplayed by someone quieter. Others are taught to play it safe, keep your head down, be agreeable, don't cause problems. So they tiptoe through life, gathering information, waiting for an opening that never comes. They watch others rise, thinking, why not me? The truth? You need to own both archetypes inside you and know when to activate each. The lion comes out when you're protecting your boundaries. The fox comes out when you're navigating a power dynamic. The lion says, this is mine. The fox asks, where's the weakness? And maybe the most powerful combination of all, a fox who can roar when needed. A lion who knows when to be silent. That's the kind of energy people feel without knowing why they respect you. It's the kind of presence that doesn't beg for authority. It commands it without force. Because let's be honest, most people are performing dominance. They're loud because they're insecure. They control others because they can't control themselves. But when you embody both the lion and the fox, your power isn't about noise. It's about nuance. You don't flinch under pressure. You don't speak just to be heard. You wait, you watch, you move with precision. And it's not manipulation, it's awareness. You're not playing games to hurt people. You're refusing to be played. That's the line Machiavelli walked, and that's why he respected leaders like Cesare Borgia, not because they were cruel, but because they were clear, strategic, unapologetically human. Borgia didn't just use fear, he used timing. He didn't just win battles, he won perception. He even killed his own brutal enforcer when it suited the public mood. Not because he had to, but because he understood that in the theater of power, appearance is everything. Now let's be clear. This doesn't mean you abandon integrity. It means you learn how to lead with both your heart and your instincts. You use the lion when the moment demands strength. You use the fox when the moment demands patience. And most importantly, you learn how to switch between the two without losing yourself in either. Because that's the real secret. Balance. When you live only in lion mode, you become a target. You move too fast, reveal too much, trust too easily. When you live only in fox mode, you become invisible. You hesitate, you overthink, you stay small. But when you learn to combine the force of the lion with the finesse of the fox, people can't predict you. And if they can't predict you, they can't control you. That's when power becomes effortless, not loud, not aggressive, just undeniable. Here's something most people never want to believe, but it's true. People don't follow the truth. They follow what they think is true. And that's why in power psychology, perception matters more than reality. It might feel unfair, it might feel manipulative, but if you want to play the real game, the one that's actually being played behind the polished smiles and mission statements, you have to understand this one principle. You don't have to be good. You just have to look good. Now, before you reject that, hear me out. This isn't about faking your way through life. It's about mastering your image so no one else gets to define it for you. Because here's what Machiavelli knew, and what too many people still miss. You can do everything right, be loyal, hardworking, and honest, but if your image doesn't reflect strength, you'll still be treated like a pawn. We live in a world where optics influence outcomes, not fairness, not truth. Optics. You could be the most ethical person in the room, but if someone else looks more competent, more charismatic, or more confident, they'll win the room. Why? Because most people don't see with clarity. They see with emotion, with bias, with instinct. They believe what feels true, not what is true. That's why image control isn't optional, it's essential. Machiavelli understood this in his time, and if anything, it's even more relevant now. Today, we live in a world shaped by headlines, social media filters, curated bios, and carefully sculpted brands. People are crafting a digital version of themselves every day, not necessarily to deceive, but to survive, to stay relevant, to protect themselves. And whether you're a leader, an employee, a creator, or just someone trying to navigate relationships, your appearance shapes how people respond to you. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. You don't get to decide what people see unless you control what you show. So let's talk about how this plays out in everyday life. You might be competent, but if you come off as indecisive, people will assume you lack confidence. You might be kind, but if you never show strength, people will assume they can walk over you. You might be honest, but if you're too transparent too soon, people might use that vulnerability against you. It's not fair, but it is human nature. We judge books by their covers, not because we're shallow, but because we're wired for speed. Our brains are constantly scanning for threats, status, and value. And unless we interrupt those assumptions with intention, they become reality. That's why Machiavelli urged leaders to keep their hands clean, even if their orders were dirty. Why? Because people want to believe in the illusion of virtue. They want to believe the person in charge is noble, even if they aren't. It's the same reason PR teams exist, the same reason politicians give rehearsed speeches, the same reason your favorite brand drops apology videos the moment controversy hits. It's not just about being right, it's about looking right. So how do you apply this without becoming fake? Simple. You curate without lying. You edit without erasing your values. Here's how. Speak with calm clarity, even if you feel anxious inside. Set boundaries confidently, without explaining yourself to everyone. Protect your private struggles, not because you're hiding, but because privacy is power. Show kindness publicly, but don't show all your cards, especially not to people who haven't earned your trust. Correct false narratives, but don't get emotional doing it. Just state the facts and move on. This isn't deception. This is psychological self-defense. Because here's the truth. You're already being judged. Every time you walk into a room, speak up in a meeting, post online, or even stay silent, people are forming opinions. And unless you take ownership of your image, someone else will create one for you. Machiavelli warned, if you win, they'll forgive your sins. If you lose, they'll forget your kindness. It's harsh, but it's real. And if you want to lead in any space, you have to stop chasing approval and start mastering perception. Remember, people forgive strength more than they respect weakness. They trust certainty more than they value vulnerability. They remember what you showed them, not what you intended. So give them something worth remembering. Control your image not to impress others, but to protect your legacy. Curate your presence not to manipulate, but to make sure your message isn't lost in the noise. Because if your appearance doesn't match your depth, your brilliance might go unnoticed. And if you let the world see only what's convenient, they'll never respect what's powerful. So be thoughtful with your visibility. Be deliberate with your silence. Be strategic with what you share. You don't need to be loud. You need to be unmistakable. Here's the truth that makes most people uncomfortable. The world doesn't reward what should work. It rewards what does work. That's the reality of power. Not ideals, not good intentions, not fairness, but results. And yet, most people live in the land of should. If I'm kind, people should treat me well. If I work hard, I should get ahead. If I'm honest, I should be respected. But Machiavelli saw what most people ignore. The game of life doesn't care about should. It rewards strategy. It rewards those who adapt. It rewards those who see reality as it is, not as they wish it to be. This wasn't cynicism. It was clarity. He saw how good people were often taken advantage of, not because they were wrong, but because they were naive, because they believed that morality alone would protect them in a world where others were playing for power. Machiavelli's message wasn't, be cruel. It was, be awake. Understand that power doesn't just flow to those with the best hearts. It flows to those with the sharpest eyes, the calmest minds, the clearest plans. And that's where two of his most powerful ideas come in, virtù and fortuna. He believed your life is shaped by two forces, fortuna, the chaos, the luck, the randomness, the storms you can't control. Virtù, your response, your preparedness, your adaptability, your skill. You can't control fortuna, but you can build virtù. You can't stop betrayal, but you can spot the signs before it happens. You can't avoid uncertainty, but you can meet it without falling apart. You can't predict every obstacle, but you can be the kind of person who's unshakable when it hits. That's the real test of strength. And it doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being ready. So how do you build this kind of inner power? Machiavelli's practical advice, adapted for our modern world, still rings true. Control your image. You don't need to show everything. Let people see what builds your influence, not what dilutes it. Keep your emotions in check. Never act from anger. Never beg. Never overshare in the name of being real. Observe more than you speak. People will always reveal their strategies, if you're quiet enough to notice. Act boldly, but only when the time is right. Fortune favors the brave, yes, but only when bravery is paired with timing. Build alliances, but never blindly trust. Loyalty is earned, not assumed. And the biggest threats often come dressed as allies. Adapt quickly. What worked for you before might not work now. The best minds move with the terrain, not against it. Focus on respect, not likability. Fear lasts longer than affection. Presence lasts longer than charm. And the final lesson, the one that ties all of this together? Inner discipline is your real fortress, because once you master yourself, you become untouchable. You no longer get thrown off by criticism. You don't spiral into overthinking when something doesn't go your way. You don't feel the need to chase approval because your confidence comes from within. Machiavelli knew the world doesn't need more people who shout. It needs people who see, clearly, calmly, strategically. When you combine awareness with action, when you lead with presence instead of panic, when you stop outsourcing your power to other people's opinions, that's when you become the kind of person others can't figure out, but can't ignore. Because power isn't about manipulation. It's about knowing when to stay silent, when to strike, when to walk away. It's about becoming someone who doesn't just survive the game, but rewrites the rules while everyone else is still playing by them. So if you've ever felt underestimated, overlooked, too soft for the world you're in, understand this. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to stop apologizing for being someone they can't control. Be the one who listens when others speak too much. Be the one who watches when others rush in. Be the one who moves when the moment is right, not just when emotions run high. Be the wolf, calm, calculated, compassionate when it's earned, but never naive, never waiting for permission to protect your power. That's not darkness, that's discipline. And in a world full of sheep, that's what makes you untouchable.